Okay. So thank you very much for being here today for this seminar with Professor Simona Iamarino. It's a great pleasure to have you here, Simona. We were just remembering our times at SPRU 20 years ago. I was just finishing my PhD and Simona was starting her career as a professor at SPRU. Associate professor in 2003.
My career is
Yes, yeah. I remember those times as well. So Simona will give a talk today on the title is The Material Basis of Modern Technologies, and we'll just mention a few of the achievements that Simona did over her brilliant career in Italy and in the UK. So Simona will just start working from this academic year in Cagliari as a full professor of applied economics, and she will be also a visiting professor at the Department of Geography and Environment at LSE. The department that you were actually formerly directing when you were a professor at LSE from 2009 to 2022. And being the director of the Department of Geography from 2014 and 2017. She's also associated with the Gran Sasso Science Institute at L'Aquila here in Italy. And she's been acting as editor, co-editor in chief of regional studies. And she's currently co-editor of the Journal of Economic Geography.
As you know, because
Yes, as I know. Yes.
Looking desperately for you.
Okay, I'll stop it here and I will leave the floor to Simona for her presentation. And again, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Really a pleasure. You hear me, right? I don't need my. I'm very loud anyway.
Simona, actually, you do because we are on streaming.
Okay.
Yes. You can use this one if you prefer.
I would rather try with this.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Right, so yes, let me explain just a few words why this double affiliation. I was at the LSE for 14 years of my life, being head of Department of Geography and Environment for 4. But then since the beginning of this year, I'm at the University of Cagliari, and that was a decision that was taken because of Brexit. So I'm one of the Italians that are coming back after having been in the UK for 25 years because of Brexit. And I keep a strong affiliation with LSE that I owe my career, the peak of my career, to SPRU and LSE, but enough is enough. I'm European. I have been working with the European Commission for regional policy and cohesion policy in Europe for 10 years. I need to be in Europe. So I chose the sun because I'm not from Cagliari, I'm from Rome, but I chose the sun and the periphery of Europe. So it's important that this definitely definitely. So this is what I'm going to present today is a line of research that I had in mind for a long time, but I was head of department and I couldn't really open up another research line. Then in 2018, 2019, I started really to implement this. Is there, yeah? Oh, okay, right. So, is it working this? No. It doesn't matter, I can, oh dear. Yes, okay. Presentation in short, what we do. I mean, we study the evolution of technology from the perspective of the critical raw materials, okay? That is, then I will define in the specific paper I present here is 13 chosen rare metals, okay? And how we dig into more than 5 million patents during 40-year periods, 1976, 2015. We use couples of, very detailed technological fields and rare metals pairs, right, to look at the impact of basically the supply, the production of these rare metals on the technological trajectory, the creation of new knowledge. Why, I'll explain in a moment why this is relevant and why this matters. The main messages that come out from this research, that is more a line of research than a single paper, is that this dependence of technologies on the rare metals and so generally critical raw materials is increasing definitely, particularly for emerging technologies in strategic fields, let's say. So, I mean, semiconductor, nanotechnologies, green energy transition, and so forth, and so on and so forth. And in this specific paper, Controlling for Science Push and Demand Pull, we see that the trajectory and the new creation of technology is shaped also by the availability, physical extraction of these resources. The implication I will tell at the end. So this paper of today is a paper co-authored with Andreas Cani and George Lee, ex-PhD students now back in China, but I have other works on the topic. Diemer and others, that is out on regional studies just a few months ago, and it's open access, so can be, it's a descriptive paper that gives a bit the general picture. I will present a couple of slides here. Then I have other work with another PhD student, Adil Said, that is going to work in Namibia as a field work, qualitative field work next summer. I'm going to. I'm very excited. And then other works in progress with both George and Adil. So why this matters, why this is relevant? We know that critical raw materials are providing a sort of infrastructure to new technological developments, okay? We all know the importance of lithium-ion batteries, and actually let me get, because I have a few things that I want to say, and not being my own field in some sense, because it is also very technical. I have to give you then a couple of examples that are important. So anyway, I mean, we know this. We know that some of these critical materials are also conflict related, okay, as the commonly known conflict minerals, okay? And therefore are on the list of the US, the EU, in order, right, to create a sort of international global regulation somehow of this, these inputs. And we know that there are increasing concerns, and this is very high topic, both in the European Commission and in the US, for precisely coping with the breaks in the supply chains overall for this kind of materials. So the critical raw materials are called vitamins or spices of technological change because they have specific properties that are chemicals, that are electrical, that are mechanical, that no other material existing so far to our knowledge can produce, right? Typical example is cobalt for the miniaturization of electronic components. I mean, either that or nothing can resist to some kind of high temperature to miniaturize the electronic components. The problems in the supply chains of these critical raw materials is, first of all, that they are scarce, so they are not abundant and equally distributed on the planet. Secondly, that their deposits are geographically concentrated, and some of them particularly in areas of the world where there are serious disruption producing, I mean, political instability, crime, conflict, and also geopolitical risk related to this, the current state of globalization, with China, a big producer, that put trade barriers and therefore, wars in this sense, also wars in the canonical sense, but it's all very insecure, right? So relevance, I mean, from McKinsey to World Bank to European Commission, I mean, there is a big debate on this, okay? We know, for example, cobalt is one of the most celebrated nobody is really sure, but more the literature in hard science tells us that cobalt is concentrated in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but in reality, I'm a regional development person, so in reality in two regions, North Kivu and Katanga, that are on the eastern border with all associated problems. You can see that it's one of the main exporters, but there are other exporters. Part of it actually comes from the RC through smuggling, and it's complicated to match the data. Who imports? You can see China, United States, Japan. This is just one, and the demand is increasing. I mean, as I said, the production of these materials is strictly linked to conflict, particularly in Central Sub-Saharan Africa in general terms. The international kind of response at the level of international organization, again, OECD, Europe, European Commission, have tried also the Americans to regulate somehow, creating this, due diligence towards human rights respect, worker respect. But due diligence is something that is implemented by large companies, and actually there are no systems in place to check, control, monitor, and assess if this is in place or not. And it's all a big fluffy, right? I mean, in the sense that is difficult to really evaluate. And there is an absence, and this is important because it's a more conceptual line of research that I'm doing with Adil. There is an absence, total absence of approaches to this in terms of place-based economic development. So we know that a lot of these materials come from specific regions in specific parts of Africa or Latin America, the famous lithium triangle. But nothing has been done. I mean, Africa is still, as you might see from World Bank, IMF, is still treated as a sort of uniform container, while in Europe we are for the specificity of every commune, right? So you see the difference and the inheritage of colonialism in thinking about development, right? So here is just to show you, I can't really go into detail because it's before I explain roughly what methodology we use, but in a previous paper, the one published in Regional Studies, we just, look at the correlation between conflict that comes from the Uppsala Conflict Data Program with demand of technologies that are intensive in these materials, and we find a correlation for all in this paper, it was the 3TG, so the classic conflict minerals, gold plus tungsten, tin, and tantalum, and we added cobalt and lithium because they are not classified formally as conflict minerals, which is a surprise, but this is the truth. And we see that we find a correlation for all of them, but tungsten, for Middle East, for Africa, for Americas, but Americas only Central and Latin America, not North America. Okay, so just to give you an impressionistic picture. This is another map that appears on the Regional Studies paper, where you can see roughly matching all the mining sites and the technology producers, so the assignees of the patents that uses this material. We have a picture that is global north technology, global south raw materials, okay? You can see that it's also a matter of regions, not Africa as a whole, okay? So in this paper so we have this previous background that has been published, and this is a new paper that now is on the second round on a journal. And I have to say, I always say in the hope that there are reviewers, that we got 3 reviewers that were very tough, but among the best I've got in my whole career. Really, really expert. I don't know who they are. I cannot know, but I will look for them later on because they were impressive. So whatever happens to the paper, they gave us invaluable advice. So the first question is simple. I mean, to what extent different technological fields rely on which rare materials, and what are the factors that influence this dependence? Or our first question is how much, to what extent, the production of these raw materials, in this sense, rare metals in this case, influence the innovation dynamics that those technologies that are reliant on. And the main hypothesis is we control for 2 classical sources, vision in the economics of innovation and new technology. So the science and technology push and the market pull, in order to see if this supply of this material in fact shapes the technological dynamics and the RM-based technologies. The literature background, this we owe to the reviewers because we were more confused at the beginning, but relies on the concept of Dosi, Giovanni Dosi, an original framework in terms of technological paradigm that is still probably the most valid framework to understand shift in technological waves, precisely. And we look at the classical debate, as I was saying, science, push, demand, pull. So the source of technology is driven by a push from science or a pull from the demand that has needs that have to be fulfilled, okay? What we found in the literature is that in the economics of innovation and literature, there is a lot about the dependence of this big shift across history in technological paradigm on materials, resources that are natural, okay? And in fact, we see that the use of this RM is growing where? In 2 ongoing technological evolution, right? Really shift of paradigm. One is clean and green energy, and the other one is Industry 4.0 related, so artificial intelligence, okay? The increasing demand for this rare metals, the element used, okay, these elements used in computing devices has grown from 11 in the 80s to more than 16 in the 2000s, but now we are in 2020. I couldn't find an estimate, but you see how exponentially growth. And so what drives this is obviously science, because it's the research in material science that is able to find out other uses, other properties of the same existing resources, okay? Associated with the production, obviously, the supply is always important, and the demand from technology. So this is what we use, okay? This is the list. That the problem is that there is no official list of this material. So rare metals is that you don't find a rare metals list acknowledged by everyone, right? But the Minor Metal Trade Association indicates 3 characteristics. They are in small quantities, they are rare, they are not traded in formal exchange market like the London Metal Exchange. They are not there, and I'll explain that why, and are important for emerging technologies. In fact, they're classified or called tech metals or critical raw materials that, according to the geologists, I work a year with them, because, you know, we are economists or economic geographers. We use, you know, intermittently metals, minerals, and geologists said, no, look, these are not minerals. It's wrong, right? It's basically metals. In fact, you see that now we are very careful. Two elements are metalloids rather than metals. So, I mean, obviously I don't have the background, and so it was very useful collaborating with the geologists. We exclude precious ores, and we exclude 17 rare earths, because otherwise it's too complicated. Just to give you, this is what I wanted to tell you. I mean, lithium, cobalt, as we know, in batteries, okay? Gallium and germanicum are fundamental in integrated circuits. Tantalum is fundamental in capacitors. Molybdenum in transistors, and indium in the displays. Just to give you an idea of this is what is related to what kind of products that we use, okay? So this is just the simple statistics on the global production of these selected rare metals, okay? This is from the US Geological Survey, covers the entire period that we get for the patents that I will explain. You can see the fluctuation. What you can see in general, apart from some being more stable, others more volatile, is that the production increases mostly in the last 15 years, and that these productions are also very sensitive to big crises such as big crash, financial, economic, global crisis of 2008, 9, and obviously, right? But the upward trends in production. Here, we just look with in relation to 1975, and you can see that gallium and indium have the production has increased by 40 times and 20 times, followed by lithium and cobalt, right? That has grown by 5 times over the period we selected, okay? These are the data on the production, okay? Really production of this. What we use then is patents, okay? Patent data, USPTO, classic indicators of innovation. And we use both the cooperative patent classification that is very detailed to the 5th digit and is also retroactive in terms of consolidating technology, because obviously technologies change over time, the definitions and the classification. So this is consistent for the 40 years. Why PO classification? Because it's nice, broad for technological areas, just to get some trends more generally. And we text mine using natural language processor techniques in order to look at the presence of these keywords, our metals, in the patents, okay? In the detailed description of the text. The methodology is very well explained bit by bit in the regional studies paper. And so we are aware that there are problems with that, because obviously in a patent you can find we are using cobalt, or we're not using cobalt, or we are saving cobalt, or we are recycling cobalt. So a lot of different meaning, right? So we had to check carefully that that we weren't picking up a random story, okay? We excluded mining and metallurgy patents, because otherwise we would have gone mad, because obviously they are related to metals in the first place. So those were excluded. And the final sample is 5 million patents over the 40 years. We obviously look at the degree of technological dependence on individual RAM that is not captured. You will see that is more a general thing, okay? So we are interested more in the trends, in the aggregate, rather than individual patents. Okay, that is a different analysis. If a technology subfield has a lot of RM-based patents, we assume that it's dependent. So the assumption is simple. But, however, we verified that, thanks to the reviewers also. We looked into the history of a few technologies, and we chose this example that is reported in the paper because it's the shift in lightning technology, okay, in technologies. And you can see that, I mean, in the old times, 75, lightning was mainly based on incandescent, so based on tungsten, right? And in many records of the technical literature, you find this shift around the end of the 2000s, where the material science has found out that gallium had this luminous properties that shifted to the lead-driven lightning, okay? To be fair, the material scientists that found out were Marushka and Akasaki, two Japanese. And right at that point, you can see inverting the trajectory. And so we went to the lead, okay? This is perfectly captured by our data. And so this gives, and there are other checks in this sense, that we are actually grasping the phenomenon. Then we have a lot of other checks, but these are, you know, trends. You can see general trends both in number of patents with at least one RM, percentage of patents, you know, overall patents reliant on RM went with respect to 75 from the 9% to the 15%, so growing. And again, you can see here, we report always in absolute terms and in relation to 1975, because this production also, just to see exactly, I mean, related to a point of time, and you can see that indium, gallium, I mean, they are really shooting up in particular, okay? Here is 7-time growth on average. And so, I mean, you can see another way to look at this, because the let's say, descriptive analysis has been very long and across two papers, you can see that the share of RM-based patents varies. This is important to understand that it varies across technology, okay? We go much further than this because we go to the 5th-digit subgroup. It varies across metals, so there are some that are more important than others. It depends on the technology, so we have a lot of variance to take into account, okay? And you can see also that one technology can rely on many different metals. So, so this is the distribution. What we use is a data set of, pairs. As we said, this technological subgroup 5th-digit I, and each RM for 13 RM, okay? And there are obviously some cleaning up of the data, because otherwise you have to match outliers and disturbance. The final sample is 53,800 pairs, in which there are 9,000 technological subgroup. This is the detail level of technology we consider, were granted 3 million patents. The dependent variable of our, you can see here is in that the number of pairs, the highest number is for cobalt and lithium, in fact, right? That combines with a lot of these very, very detailed technologies. The dependent variable of our estimate is simply a share, okay? It's the share of patents in technology subgroup 5-digit that use RM over the total of patents for that subgroup I, okay? So we see in relative terms which technological subgroup is more intense of RM. So the model is reflects obviously our theoretical framework informed by the literature that I just summarized very shortly. So is the share, and we have, first of all, our main regressors is the production. We wanted to know precisely the production, how it influenced the trajectory. But then we have science, right? The science push. So the science papers that appear, Web of Science, on citing this RM, okay? And then we have further, we have a variable for the demand price. These are RM prices, okay? Very detailed over time. And then we have another proxy for the demand, that is the forward citation difference. Why? Because as known in the literature of patents, if a patent receives a lot of citation from other patents, it means that it has a high market value, okay? Value of commercialization. And therefore that is another proxy for demand to see, this forward citation, how they proxy the demand. Then we have the typical knowledge stock that obviously the more patents RM, based on RM, you have, the more you would expect this dependence to be higher. So this is a classic. Knowledge stock is always in this kind of. And then we have a couple fixed effects, so for all pairs, okay, in order to rule out any kind of disturbance or specific dynamic in the specific couple, one technology, one metal, and time trend, okay? These both variables are measured by ratio initial to 1975, particularly because production, these materials are produced in very different quantities, and therefore you have to standardize somehow, because otherwise there is. So, question that I'm sure PhDs and youngers immediately, what about, endogeneity? Obviously, we can say that, production affects technological production, but also new technologies can influence the production, demanding more. So we started thinking about it, and unlike the major metals, these rare metals are found in low concentration, and they come from base metal, okay? So the more abundant and massively produced are copper, iron, aluminum, titanium. These are the base metal. So RM don't have deposit on their own, but are associated to these big quantity metals, okay? And so there is this degree of companionability, that is the degree of companionability. Some of them are reliant on one base metal, are co-produced with one. Some depend on a few, okay? But they always have this companionability that allows us to use this variable as instrument, because it affects the production of rare metals, but it doesn't affect technological production, because iron is produced so much in so big quantities for construction industry, that it doesn't go with RM technologies. So precisely, this is what I was already saying, okay? The influence is unidirectional, and it's in the literature. We found, obviously, literature that confirms this, okay? That this RM, although they are very, very valuable, their production is minimal compared to that of base metal. So it's not worth for extracting mining companies to search for cobalt in particular. They extract, and then there is the extraction, but they can't do that, okay? Just for the sake of the. And so the RM production is shaped by base metals, okay? But precisely what I was saying. So these are the main results. Oops, sorry. This is the basic equation, and you can see the model that I was saying, that RM production. Oddio, there is this. Can I move this icon on the other side? Yeah, is it possible? Just because it's so that is in column 4, okay? It's the IV, the first stage is in the paper, but anyway, what we find is that production of RM has a significant impact on technologies that are RM based, okay? So the share increases in that for that pair, okay, for each pair subgroup of technology RM, that our also hypothesis that science, advances in science in rare metals is in fact influencing the production of technology, which is obvious, right? We, as far as the demand pool is concerned, we don't find that much on the RM price, so it's not really having a big impact. But what is instead very significant is the forward citation difference. So if in a pair there is, I mean, in a subgroup there is a high share of forward citation differences with those that are not RM, which gives us the idea that that subgroup of patents based on RM have a very high commercial value, that gives the effect on the demand. Prices are much more volatile and don't look associated with production of technology, okay, which is in fact consistent with. Now, so the robustness checks that introduce other variables or other thinking. This we owe again to the wonderful reviewers that maybe they will kill us, but anyway, it was worth. We can see that, okay, this is repeated because what about, so the validity of the IV is all this table here, right? And you see, excluding subgroups of technologies that also use keywords related to the base method, because that can drive the effect, okay? So we exclude all the patents that, in fact, you can see observation that are much lower, right? And it's still significant, and the variables, I mean, the value on the coefficient is quite clearly the same. RM price doesn't. I forgot to tell you actually that we use time lags, both of 3 years and 5 years, because there is always, you know, a delay in patents as from the literature. Then they said, yes, but the energy transition patents are particularly intensive in this critical raw materials, so it might be that what drags the effect is energy patents. And so we got rid also of including all the energy transition metals, okay? And it's still there, the effect. Then the companionability. What if the metal has a companionability below the 100? So let's get rid of those that have a lower. Let's take into account the heterogeneity. So we created dummy for each degree of companionability. And finally, there is a first stage with a cross term between base metal and RM metal dummies for time, because the relationship between base metal and rare metals across these 40 years has changed. And so we keep these effects. I mean, this is all from the reviewers. The results are stable. I forgot to tell you in this, you can see that basically what the coefficient on the fourth column tells you that an increase of 1 unit, which is an increase of 100% with respect to 1975, because this is what is our regressor, gives an increase of about it's zero, but an increase that is translated to almost 3%, 3% in the 2.8 increase in RAM technology patent share in each subgroup. So is quite relevant, the effect. So then we did other checks using different identification of RM-based technology, looking not at the detailed text of the patent, but the claim text, because you never know, the claim text might be a summary that the result is still the same, and using also alternative methods. So we used an absolute number of patents by technology subgroup and or as dependent variable using a Poisson model. The results are strong. There are many other there, but I mean, I don't want to. Main conclusion is that we find support to our general hypothesis, right? Because we can see that an increase in the production of these metals provide somehow a positive impact on these technologies, because it encourages also more R&D, okay? On the contrary, however, if the supply chain is disrupted and you have less production and distribution through trade of these metals, it can create constraint on technological advancement, okay? And so technology makes possible to go beyond these rare resources, okay? But this is it really in the long run, because it tends to coincide with technological shift, and you don't have technological shift every 3 years, okay? So, I mean, on the other hand, technology can make the use of these materials becoming, with the same materials, becoming more diversified, more with advanced functionalities. Think about the gallium properties in terms of lead, right? I mean, gallium was there, has always been there, but nobody knew that the potential functionalities in technological terms was there until 2010. It was Nobel Prizes. And so what we see is a growing dependence over time of technology on these materials. And the fact, now, I mean, I'll finish here, and this is further work. We are focusing on renewable energy value chain, also employing trade data, okay? But in general, the main insights to which I want to finish is that this understanding these determinants, this condition for green transition, but also for AI transition, okay? Analyzing this physical, natural resources-based material, and I know that you do here a lot of work that is connected, okay, is important, because, I mean, we shift resources from conventional energies to alternative energies, in this case to critical raw materials, but in this way, we have also to take into account that we sort some environmental issues in the global north particularly, but some also cost of, pollution, infringement of human rights, workers' rights, community rights in other places where possibly there are local miners, okay, that might actually appropriate some of the revenues. And this is what we're doing on the field work, because the value chains has to go to the end, right? And you can see all these awful tensions that are from artisanal miner scattered around in these areas, and the big mining companies that, moreover, in sub-Saharan Africa, they are almost monopolized by Chinese companies, which creates also problems even more in due diligence, even if I don't believe in due diligence anyway. But this is it. Thank you very much. I think there is a lot to do.
So thank you very much, Simona, for this very interesting presentation. I think it matches very well with what we are doing here at Unitelma Sapienza in our research group on sustainability transition. The critical raw material is one of the key aspects of this transition for several reasons, and the one that you were pointing out of the relation between these green technologies and the use of this critical raw material is at the heart of it. Okay, so we have now some time to take a few questions for Simona. So please.
Thoughts, comments, non so. We not everybody speaks Italian here. Because not everybody, so better for me it's better. I mean,
first of all, I would like to thank you for this very interesting presentation. I really appreciate it a lot. And please forgive me, the question is not that relevant. I mean, it's just a curiosity.
Comments, thoughts, even completely unrelated.
Because at the beginning of the presentation, you were talking about what came first, no? Technology, demand. So have you thought about the role of public funds? Because, for example, now European Union is, giving a lot of money in research, for example, solar panels or batteries or what else. Do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, actually, policy is not is one of the major point of arrival for me. I always think about territories. I don't go for big boxes. Okay, so however, from the European perspective, and even more because on my list of top, it's reported in the regional studies paper. If you are curious, look, there are the first 25 users in terms of technological demand, so patents owned by companies, and at the top is Samsung, followed by all the big tech, including Google. Okay, so big tech are the big owners of this technology. So public funds, public research, what should we do? Yeah, definitely invest in public R&D go beyond to find alternative use. Can be in material sciences precisely in order to find substitutes that are, more accessible at less human cost, and on the other hand trying to find recyclable routes, right, in order to save, to recycle, to however, in parallel, and this is a different policies, not R&D, right? Also because publicly owned is more manageable than influencing the due diligence on Samsung. We all know this. On the other hand, I think it's very important to see local effect, because what I've read so far in the last 5 years about DRC, but not only, lithium triangle in Latin American regions, corner, Colombia, Peru, Argentina. I mean, there are two sides of the stories, and the policy level is very, very different. If we put no effort whatsoever in looking at, funds for the local communities to appropriate what's theirs, actually. So there are different, and
Any other questions? Please. Can you, no, the mic. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Angela Zanoni, first year PhD. I'm fresh here. So I wanted to ask again a quite European-centered question, and especially I was thinking of the strategic autonomy policy the EU is bringing about. Very general. I don't know. I just wanted to. Like, I was wondering, do you think that circular economy and like the recycling of these raw materials could be like they have a role in shifting geopolitical, like the compass right now, or is it like irrealistic?
Shifting geopolitical is always just geopolitical, so it's difficult to. But definitely recycling is a very major thing and is not done properly. You have to start from school and say whatever electronic device you have, create. I mean, I don't know in Rome, but in London, at some point there were some of these big electronics things. Nowadays have disappeared for some reason. Well, I mean, the UK is going into a sort of crisis of identity that has never been there in previous centuries. So but also here I don't see that. For example, it's just a stupid thing. Kids at school could be told this is based on the work and the death of children like you. So recycle and technological and research advances in how to recycle, increase the levels of reusability in a way. It's the point that I was doing is a very specific R&D policy at the European level, but at the same time looking also to more micro level policies in the north and in the produced space.
Can I add?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Looking at the underdeveloped world perspective, like, do you think that if Europe got more independent in that sense, it would be like a development opportunity, meaning it could help those countries to get out of poverty traps and an economy that.
What do you mean by Europe becoming more?
Yeah, I mean, less relying on import of those materials.
It's more complicated than that, because at the moment we cannot become more independent until we find out something that can work instead. Okay? Or I think we are all interdependent in this world. Interdependence is not a bad thing if every part involved in the interdependence has its fair share of value added. Okay? So more than becoming isolated, I've been looking at multinationals, technology and geography and local economic development for now 33 years. And what I see is not deglobalization or it's different forms of globalization that changes shapes depending on political order, and it will always be. But nobody is going to deglobalize. Nobody is able to do things in isolation. And sorry to get back again, but we have the examples of the century with the British, right? So, it's, however, creating the conditions once and for all, being very vocal, very loud, and working on ensure balance. So somehow breaking the big monopolies and trying to have a prominent role of states and supranational states in order to regulate and to see where this material comes from, who is appropriating the revenues, what is the workforce employed, what condition. It has to be, right? So a bit less accent in increasing productivity and maybe a bit more emphasis on how to distribute well.
Was interesting. Thank
Okay. So I think that we need to have clear social targets, and this is really important for European if we are importing. So we must make sure that several socio-economic conditions are achieved. The big question is how to control, because theory is something, but practice, yeah. So
I think the first step is to look at specificity, not only in Europe, but starting to look at specificities also.
Of course.
In these big boxes, Africa.
Yeah.
Just to travel from 100 kilometers, you find different language, different cultures, different. So, how can you treat?
Yeah, because we're never talking about countries. We're always talking about Africa. And this is really, yeah.
Yeah, but in Europe, we don't even talk about countries anymore. It's regions, cities, rural, urban, all like this, the policy, right? So that is very, very important. Changing mentality of people.
Okay. Rocco, I think he has another question. Any other question after Rocco? Okay. And then I have a question.
Okay.
No, so I have different questions, but we'll start from the first probably. I see that you have prices, but prices do not have an effect. Do you have any measure of volatility, for instance? Because price volatility might be a measure of implied risk in some way. So the extent in which that kind of investment is risky or not. Do you have something?
We have each material prices on the global market because these are like gold, right? And so the prices year by year, actually, we have it even below the years, we can track. But the problem is prices are particularly volatile and although we standardize everything to 1975, as I explained, why? Because the quantities produced change according to the material. And so, just to give you a stupid thing, for some, you need a ton. For another, you need a small quantity. They have the same value. You see what I mean? So that's why we standardized to 75. This thing of the prices didn't work here, and we were expecting that, in fact. We are looking for better proxies of the demand, and so, as I showed too quickly, obviously, but here we are also looking at exports values of products listed officially, not invented by us, that incorporates those metals, okay, in order to have a different proxy of the demand, okay? And we are at the moment just in a sort of advanced stage of descriptive statistics, focusing only on energy transition. But I agree with you, the prices are hardly comparable. This is the cross metal.
Okay, and the second question, um, is science anticipating patents, or there's also the opposite is also true? So is there a way, or it might be interesting to check if science is anticipating patents, but patents are anticipating
Right.
future science?
Normally science push according to the theory, right? Is science that tracks technology, although, as we know from the history of technology, airplane, the old kind of idea were invented for any science of aerodynamics was the other way around, okay? In this case, our main regression is the production, and so we instrument on the production, finding the base metals, we did an instrument on science because our theoretical assumption following the literature is that science push. So is the determinant of the technology and not the other way around.
But in general, it might be interesting to check if there's kind of bidirectional causality. So, for instance, it might be interesting to check if, for instance, research done in some countries is a proxy of the attractiveness of that kind of material for that country in the next years, and then if this amplify research in subsequent year after the patent is introduced, for instance, this kind of a kind of gravity model where
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, it's interesting.
And the other thing, I see that you have basically co-occurrence of raw material within the same pattern. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But
So
that's why we work at technology pairs
okay,
level.
but you can turn this into a network perspective, studying the centrality of raw material compared with the whole network of raw material, for instance. And for instance, even to study the resilience of the system, the sustainability of the system, because, for instance, if a raw material is highly central into the network, then it is there's low heterogeneity, and so if that there should be more vulnerability to systemic risk if that material will be no more available in the future, something like this.
I see more, I mean, and we did it, the centrality of technologies that are RM based more than centrality, because how do you measure is on the basis of production, but as I explained, the quantity mean very different things across.
Okay, but for instance, you can create a co-occurrence network of words, for instance, checking within the word, and I see that you apply text mining for patient. So you can see the most central word into the network of pattern. Check if there's a.
No, but those we have. I mean, all the intensities are calculated. It's not reported in a network terms, right? But we precisely this. You know, these are already aggregated. That we have really which technology is in terms of what. Okay, you can report that in a network.
Okay, this is the point.
Yeah.
It is more a question. In your perspective, it might make some sense to do this or not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a sort of free stuff in the network.
The same, but applying a network perspective.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just a curiosity, because during the presentation you said several times that you don't trust due diligence. So my question is, why we shouldn't trust due diligence too?
I don't say contrast. Is that due diligence is something that is good that is there. I'm not saying that it's not and it's better than nothing, but I haven't seen any rigorous way to check, monitor, and assess what extent it is implemented, what are the benefits, there are liabilities, what is the heterogeneity across sector firms, is something that is. I'm not saying that everything has to be measurable, and I'm a qualitative person together with quantitative, and I do both precisely because I believe in the, also big data set can tell us a lot about trends generally, but rarely tells us about people and places. So, but due diligence is something that at the end, a company, and I had some case studies with students, you go into the Coca-Cola website and you find a huge display of corporate social responsibility practices. there are many more counterexamples of disasters in this sense than actual results of long-term impact commit. Is window dressing, as my colleague Elisa Giuliani in Pisa says. She is big in this dark side of innovation. Sorry.
Okay, so you think it's more the problem on how bad they are written in terms of standards, or
that together with there should be something supra firm that allows to go for a checklist, clear, consistent over time. If you look at Samsung corporate social responsibility, I talk about corporate social responsibility because it's more visible also, otherwise due diligence is a statement, okay? But you go and you see that Samsung has done millions of random programs distributing iPad to kids in villages in Kenya and then in but you know, you do that for 1 year, then they don't have electricity and the batteries run out and that's it. What happened 10 years ago to all this nobody knows. Then jump to the new school where Samsung is teaching computer science in a village in Kinshasa. I mean, there would be somebody saying, look, you commit to this, we want to see where you are in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, according to this key performance indicators. Rely on primary data. No, exactly. The local actors. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just a final question for you. I want to go back to the initial question made about circular economy. I think this is an aspect which is quite relevant to your study, and it's a bit overlooked in your research. Because if you think about patents which are related to this critical raw material, rare earth, rare materials, they can have completely different impacts in terms of the demand of this raw material, of these rare materials. If it is a patent that has an impact on increasing the production of a specific good that uses that material, then of course they might have an increase in the demand for that material. But if it is a patent, and I think that from the data that you have, you're not able now, at this stage, you're not able to distinguish between these two kind of patents. If it is a patent that cited that material, but is related to a circular economy, new technology, which is basically recovering the raw material, then the demand at the global level and the flow, north-south, global north, global south flows will be impacted in a completely different way, if you see what I mean.
I mean, yeah, no, you are. This is why I wrote, right? Yeah, where is it? No, it was very beginning. Because that is at the moment warning degree of technological dependency on individual RM is not captured. So it's obviously that there are but we are working on more than 5 million patents with text analysis. So it takes months only to see what kind of technologies are trying or what kind of patents are trying to be sustainable in the sense of doing recycling would require maybe to analyze a subsum. Okay, maybe in renewable energy to look, but then you have to text mine different words. You have.
I mean, you could create a subsample of those patents which are also related to circular economy, and then see how your analysis changes. I would say that you would have very different results if you concentrate on those innovations, those patents that are related to circular economy.
In fact, you saw that in the, I mean, it's not circular economy, but one of the robustness check as was precisely excluding energy.
Okay, but this is
to see if the result was still there. The
Yeah.
result is still there, although the coefficient is lower, but in any case, yeah, we can start by identifying circular economy patterns and
then maybe you do the same robustness check, exclude or concentrate your
on
attention
RM.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. RM and non-RM. Yeah. Done. And these are all ideas very, very good from science push, circular economy, centrality, and those. Well, I mean, this is a research area, it's not one paper.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure, and collaboration, we can do everything.
Okay.
Collaborate.
So thank you very much again, Simona, for this talk and for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to share.
Okay, fine.